there is I think, an emotional aspect of this for Jews to hear the word apartheid, because nobody likes to think that they're that they are in some way implicated in apartheid, but the word means something, and it has been used by Israeli officials and former Israeli officials going on years now in this context. It was not like there were some lefty activists and the former head of Mossad says like, they've convinced me.
Yeah.
It is, these people very often worked with their counterparts in South Africa either during the apartheid regime or shortly thereafter. And they see what John Kerry, that screaming leftist John Kerry, saw a decade ago, which is you can either have a Jewish state or you can have a democracy. You cannot have both.
And also, I want to say, not just former Israeli officials, the United Nations rights experts, apartheid. Human Rights Watch, apartheid. The humanitarian groups on this front are saying the words apartheid.
Amnesty International, yeah.
So they don't like these words.
The conceit is all of that. It's only like college campus people saying this.
No. These are the most respected humanitarian rights groups in the world.
And they don't like these words. And so, because they realize it's uncomfortable. Here's Greg Gutfeld talking about another words that are reality, but make him uncomfortable.
If you want to see how sheep-like the media is, what two words are you now hearing that came from the head of the UN? Collective punishment. That's the new phrase. You're going to be hearing that a lot this week. You already are, and it's being targeted at Israelis. They're unleashing collective punishment. It's a nonsense phrase. It's a nonsense. If anybody is guilty for what's happening, it's Hamas. Hell, you could say the American citizens under Biden are experiencing collective punishment. The New York City protests make for strange bedfellows. You have young girls who go by they and them, supporting those who would eviscerate them in a heartbeat. It's amazing to see these so-called progressives, the oh-so-tolerant and caring, siding with the most extreme, the most dogmatic, the most intolerant factions on earth. Girls with nose rings and pink hair agree with old bearded men in robes about what to do with the bad people. This message is scary because what it means is that the contagion has spread from one generation to another, and that means it is here to stay. It's here in America. The melting pot has now been poisoned. We've done the poisoning. Last week I said this was hysteria. You know it's hysteria when the Desert Massacre doesn't penetrate your mindset. That's the proof. And it's scary. The reason why the protests are scary is that the protesters hate that massacre, not because of its sheer brutality. You can go on forever talking about the disgustingness. It's that the massacre validates Israel's stance and justification for cohesion and self-defense. It's no different than the Holocaust denial. It's a defense to protect your bad ideas so you can continue to hate. The protesting here is easy. You can do it for 3 hours, go home and go back to PlayStation. But over there, people are defending their right to exist. You aren't sacrificing a thing. You're fine. They aren't. You could have protested October 8th. It would have been real. But weeks later, it comes off as performative. And it's amplified to preserve a terror sect, not to ensure peace or prevent war. The American...
What's bizarre about this is that he doesn't even seem to know what he's reading off of this thing.
It just was a bunch of like criticisms about the dress and attire of the women. He keep going back to girls at these protests. I was at the protest they're showing the B-roll of
with
there.
Your purple hair.
Yeah, all my purple hair. It was one of the most diverse protests, and I've covered protests as a reporter, and I've been a part of protests in my life. One of the more diverse, incredible experiences of like mass demonstration I've ever been a part of, just to put that out there from my firsthand experience. But
what's interesting is that so much of what the right and is doing is attempting to provide mechanisms to not believe your eyes, to not it's all defensive. I mean, the idea that collective punishment means nothing is absurd. We know that it doesn't mean anything. There has been almost a century's worth of like international law against collective punishment. So the concept exists. And if the concept exists, and you have literally 2 days ago, Netanyahu going out there and talking about Amalek, the fierce enemy of the Israelites, for whom the Bible says, we should say the first book, everything should be wiped out. Every ox, every ass, every suckling, every child,
infant. Yeah,
you should wipe out all of them. And if this is supposedly Hamas, and we are to believe that Hamas is the true dictator in Gaza, which I think there's a very good argument. Not terribly democratic situation there. Certainly, over half the population is not even eligible to vote for these people. There hasn't been a vote there in 16 years. There's, arguments about their legitimacy. But certainly, if you're going to make that in the exact same statement as he did there, right? Like he blames Hamas. Well, if you blame Hamas, then how can you allow for thousands of children to be bombed to death?
Yep.
How can you allow for thousands of adults who, in your formulation, are innocent? How can you say that's not collective punishment? Well, you've got
that's
UN,
really who accepts it.
That's the point.
Who really accepts collective punishment is Greg Gutfeld.
Right. I mean, and he's trying to deny the existence essentially of the word. But if we're trying to, these people are negating their claims of immorality, which are, like, especially in the wake of the terror attack, completely applicable to Hamas, about not valuing the lives of innocents, and then disregarding it when it comes to the bombing, the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza, which is like what we have control over, not Hamas's terror attack. We have control over this because we fund it. Like, is one of the planks of that is supposedly Hamas doesn't respect the lives of innocents. But then they're saying that it's fine to kill innocents because, hey, they're human shields and there's no concept of collective punishment. I also just think it's notable that conservatives seemingly have they're so morally bankrupt in this way that they cannot even understand the idea that people are not completely campist in their perception of humanity and that they just might actually want to stand up for innocent life. Like, you can just see how he just doesn't even contend with that fact.
I think it's by design. I mean, I don't think it's a lack of capability. It's his job to tell his audience that A, collective punishment doesn't even, what the hell does that even mean? And then B, anybody who's protesting are the same he, she, they, people who want, trans people in your bathroom. I mean, this is the multiple ways in which they're trying to obscure what's really going on here. And that's his job. That is his job. I mean, and I don't even think he's that great at it. I don't think he had a clue on half of what he was reading there. That's certainly not what he wrote. And he's got like a 2-page, who knows who wrote that up for him.
Improvised war crime denial.
Yeah. I mean, unlike Greg Gutfeld, the left has the capacity to see past people's skin color and their association with the government that rules them, or their religion, and chooses to stand in opposition to massive war crimes being funded by our very government. And I mean, I'm sure the conservative audience that he's appealing to there can't understand it. Maybe he does, but again, too, like, the reason that people are in the streets, it's a very simple concept. I would like to take Gutfeld to Politics 101 class about the funding of the bombardment of Gaza is because you protest what your government does. That is the nature of protests for the most part. The United States is funding Israel. Israel is committing these atrocities. That's the reason that's the focus. It's not that difficult to comprehend.
Can we listen to just the second part of this, just because he gets to the skin color aspect of this very, very directly?
Okay.
Serve a terror sect, not to ensure or prevent, to ensure peace or prevent war. The American experiment has always been about live and let live. It's true diversity, not a fake kind, but the tools that we use to protect that diversity, that melting pot, have been poisoned, and that leads to why the Jews are hated. The Jews are hated because they are cohesive. They stick together as we tear each other apart. That's why they hate Israel, because the oppressor versus oppressed mindset cannot penetrate a pluralistic success that remains cohesive. Sound familiar? That's America. So you're free to protest all you want, but it is interesting that you aren't protesting the Ukraine war. Hundreds of thousands are already dead in collective punishment, a collective punishment that we are paying for. Why doesn't that matter? Because it doesn't fit the oppressed versus oppressor filter.
Wait, what?
Code Pink literally is doing that. I mean, and it's a different type of thing because Russia's the aggressor in that conflict.
Yes.
I'm unclear. What is the collective punishment that we're paying for there?
I think he's saying our continued support of Ukraine is leading to conditions where civilians are dying.
Goo goo gaga stuff. I mean, we're funding, there's valid critiques of that, but we're funding the party that was invaded, defense elements there. And yeah, I mean, that's.
But there are people who have been protesting.
Exactly. I don't remember Greg Gutfeld being like, look at Code Pink here, unless it was like because Marjorie Taylor Greene got a sort of photo op they had to distance themselves from.
It is odd too, and I just want to say that within like the first week or week and a half of Israel's bombardment of Gaza, more children were killed in Gaza than have been in the entirety of this war in Ukraine.
More bombs were dropped, I think, in about 1 week in Israel than we saw in the entire Ukraine conflict, I think.
And the first year of our invasion of Afghanistan.
Oh, that's what it was.
I think I saw Noah Cohen pulled out, like, we've passed the initial invasion of Iraq for civilian casualties. Who knows, but...
I mean, they're so highly concentrated, it's not difficult.
Exactly. It's a different type of operation going on than our invasion of Iraq than the just shelling of Gaza.
Which is why perhaps Israel-Hamas war is not the correct way to frame what's happening here.
Sound familiar? That's America. So you're free to protest all you want, but it is interesting that you aren't protesting the Ukraine war. Hundreds of thousands are already dead in collective punishment, a collective punishment that we are paying for. Why doesn't that matter?
I'll just say, real quick, Ian Bremmer, like some blowhard consultant guy on Twitter, said, why isn't the DSA talking about Yemen? And it's like the DSA has a whole page and has done multiple different events on Yemen. But go ahead.
That you aren't protesting the Ukraine war. Hundreds of thousands are already dead in collective punishment, a collective punishment that we are paying for. Why doesn't that matter? Because it doesn't fit the oppressed versus oppressor filter based on pigment. The white on white war doesn't matter. So this isn't even about people. This is about division and creating hate from within.
So it's the Jewish race factor and the power factor.
Perhaps.
Dana.
One comment on
you know why he says perhaps? It's because he doesn't even know what he just said. And so he doesn't know what the question is. And he doesn't even know, like, he was just there to deliver that, really, honestly, like, it was so purpley prose for television. I couldn't even, he certainly couldn't follow it. And the reason why he couldn't answer Jesse Waters' dumbass question is because he didn't even know what he just said.
He started saying that the concept of collective punishment is not really a thing, and then said there's collective punishment happening in Ukraine.
And I'm not even understanding, like, by whom?
Well,
who is punishing whom?
He's flattening. He's saying collective punishment, whatever. Just disperse with that notion. It's not even a real thing. Any death in war can be constituted as collective punishment, which is just like, a child thinks this way, or somebody who has never had access to the internet where they could Google the term collective punishment.
Go back just before Jesse Waters asked, this is my favorite thing, is that, like, you've delivered this 3-page diatribe that you don't know what it means. You get asked one simple question by the brainiac Jesse Waters, and you have so little clue as what you just said that you just like, maybe. Go back.
Filter based on pigment. The white-on-white war doesn't matter. So this isn't even about people. This is about division and creating hate from within.
So it's the Jewish race factor and the power factor.
Perhaps.
Dana.
One comment on the media.
How do you have such a monologue where you're trying to be decisive and opinionated and then just go perhaps like?
He had no idea what he was talking about. Literally no idea what he was talking
It's
about.
like his brain was on a skillet. Like
Yeah. Just
Perhaps.
the neurons had stopped firing.
It's actually
after
brilliant. It's a brilliant response because if you said maybe, you'd sound like an idiot. But if you say perhaps,
yeah.
then you're.
It's like you fill in the blanks.
I'm not here to. I report. You decide.